been a while. I'm Eva, and I would like to welcome you to my porch and what is going to be the new iteration of my podcast. I'm going back to the charm of it, and this podcast will be about all of my making life, not just knitting and reading, just all of my slow living, I suppose. Can you tell I haven't scripted this? I never scripted podcasts, but in particular, I wanted to sit down with you today because I miss you. Sitting can be difficult for me with my chronic illnesses and pain. As you saw, hooked myself into a trusty back heating pad. But I have to sit anyway today because I'm making applesauce. Joel and I have a share in community-supported agriculture. We share it with our neighbors, and being able to say that makes me so happy. Participating in community-supported agriculture was something I dreamed of for a lot of years, but since I was primarily using public assistance, food stamps, for my food once I lived on my own, that wasn't compatible with CSA shares. And so one of the pleasures of living with Joel and having access so I love my porch, but we live on a quite busy road, so there's going to be traffic noise. I'll try to edit it out, but I'm no longer worried about things being perfect. Anyway, as I was saying, now, because I live with Joel, we use regular money as well as food stamps for our groceries, and that means that we can support a local farm. In case you haven't heard of it, Community Supported Agriculture, or CSAs, are something that small farmers can do where they sell a share in their produce early in the year. So they get that money in order to buy seeds, equipment, I'm sure other things that I don't know about because I'm not a farmer. And then later in the season, once the produce starts coming, you get to pick up a box every week. And it's always in season, it's very local. And this is it's at least our second, it might be our third year doing it. We split a full share with our neighbors. And that's even better because it means we only have to drive out and pick up our box every other week. But, so we were picking up the last box for the season, was the point of this story. And I noticed they have a farm stand where you pick them up. And they had this peck of apples for applesauce, and it was only $5. And I'm not sure how much this peck weighs, because when I put it on my scale, which is a kitchen scale, but I bought it for knitting, so I think it goes up to 11 pounds, which is, about 5 kilos. When I put it on the scale, it gave me the error message, so I know it's more than 11 pounds of apples. I will probably weigh it before I finish making the applesauce, just to make sure I have proportions right. But yeah, for $5, that seemed like a very affordable way to keep us in applesauce. Especially since, unlike a lot of the jams and other produce that I've been making, applesauce doesn't even require sugar. You can can it at home in either a water bath canner, or I use a steam canner, without any added sugar. So it's a really accessible way to preserve that taste of fall. And Joel really loves applesauce. He's not always interested in all of the things I make, especially I haven't gotten him on either the kale bandwagon or the squash bandwagon yet. But he does love apples. So. Anyway, as I was saying, I really missed you. And I've missed you for a while. So what's changed? Why am I sitting down now to record? Well, I am now seeing a therapist. I have wanted to see a therapist for a long time, but I didn't think I could afford to because I'm on a limited budget, and I didn't think my insurance covered therapy. When I went to the insurance website and searched for therapists, it only brought up either ones that worked in group homes or care facilities or ones who focused on substance abuse as opposed to personal therapists. But it turns out most of the therapists, like the kind I was looking for, that my insurance covers, are classified as social workers. So they do cover them. And I found one that does telemedicine, and she's really good, and I think I've been seeing her for about 2 months now. And this last week, I wanted to talk with her about how to live my values better. I'm 37, and as I kind of get ready for my 40s, which I'm very excited about, that's one of the things that's kind of been upward on my mind. And I've been reading Care Work, which is a book about disability justice. Hang on 1 minute, because I can't remember the author. Leah Lakshmi Pibsna Samara Sinha. Dreaming Disability Justice. And as I was reading this book, which is very well written, I noticed some discomfort in the essays about her time on the road, her time being a very visible and active activist, for lack of a better phrase. And it made me feel like I wasn't doing enough with my life. I think as someone that very much wants to see a better world happen and tries to spend a lot of time dreaming about what that world could be, but I don't get to spend I live in a very beautiful area, and I live on a road that connects the regular highway to the very beautiful highway drive that is through a park and lake, so that's why we're so busy. What was I saying? Oh, that I have a small life, and honestly, I love that. I love spending time with my friends and family and supporting them in their joys. I love finding my own joy. I love making my house comfortable. I love spending time with all of my pets. But I worry that it's a little bit selfish, especially when I read about people who are really devoting their lives to activism and living a lifestyle that honestly I wouldn't want, but seems more morally valuable to me. And as I was talking about this with my therapist, because it seemed like the kind of thing that she would have thoughts on, she reminded me that there can be a lot of ways to live our values and kind of set an example. And she asked if I used social media at all, because that's a way to, reach a wider audience without having to leave the house, which is difficult for me, at least, with my chronic illnesses. And so I told her, I used to have a podcast, and I used to be on Instagram, but I started to feel overwhelmed, and it felt like I could never make it perfect. Perfect in the sense of I started to feel overwhelmed trying to make sure it was accessible to everyone. And I started to feel overwhelmed on Instagram about whether I should be making posts about all of the traumas happening everywhere or not. And if I should be making those posts, then I should probably be making posts about all of them. But if I shouldn't be making those posts, then is my silence complicity? And I got caught up very much in my head and just retreated. And I still have that. I still am afraid that I am going to mess up, or that me sharing a video about how much I love applesauce and making applesauce myself from local apples might just be frivolous and not helpful. But I'm sitting with that fear, and then I'm looking past it. And I really miss getting to connect to a wider community. These past couple years where I haven't been active on social media, like I said, I have an incredible local friend network, and I haven't been lonely, but my local friend network, as wonderful as they are, it's just not as broad as my internet friends are. And I can see them, when you mainly meet up in person, that means you're mainly meeting up if you feel well enough to leave the house or have people over. My friends are really good about coming over to meet me. But even then, sometimes that's still not accessible to me. Whereas my online friends are much more accessible. And I know that there's a lot of us living in isolation for one reason or another. Maybe it's a physical disability, mental disabilities, maybe it's just economic things, I think that there are, so many reasons I can think of why people would mainly interact with their friends and people they admire through the internet instead of locally and face-to-face. And as someone who, in my 20s, that was my community that kept me alive. So I never want to invalidate that. And I would love to be a part of that again. So here I am, showing up in a more vulnerable way than I used to, because I want to talk about the things that matter, which includes knitting. Knitting always matters. But I don't want to come across as anything other than what I am, which is a very curious person who's always questioning, always trying to learn, and also goes through life with a whole lot of privilege. So I'd just like to state that I really appreciate all of you, and I will be very grateful. Anytime that I need to be called in, I will be grateful to anyone who is up for doing that, because I'm sure I will be. No one can be perfect. And yeah, I'm just trying not to live from a place of fear and perfectionism anymore. And we'll see how that goes. So that was a nice little philosophical ramble about why I'm back. But I also want to catch you up on what I've been doing. But first of all, I am wearing a scarf. Woo! It's a very long scarf. And I knit this a few years ago, I think. And it's a free pattern from Knitty that I will link in the show notes because I can't remember what it's called. And it's a scarf that is knit in pieces. Hang on, let me put down my sample. I don't think my hands are too sticky to touch the scarf, but I'll find out later. So you knit it in 2 halves, starting from the ends, and then you graft it in the middle. Oh, there's my grafting. Yeah, you can see it. It's not quite as... and that made this scarf so nice to knit because it meant that I could use up every yard of yarn that I wanted to. And this actually was this yarn's second incarnation. Oh, sorry, there's a migrating sparrow right outside the window in my service berry. One of the things I've done is plant a front yard pollinator garden, which is the area of our little plot that gets the most sun. And this is its second fall, and the pollinators are finding it. And it's just so wonderful to see my kin. And this week there's been a lot of migrating sparrows. My friend Christy, who is much more knowledgeable about birds than me, described them as, I believe, white-throated, which it looks like this one probably is, because they've definitely got a white throat. And then I think chirping was the other one. I'm not sure. But he's just sitting there. Okay. But I was talking about my scarf. See, one of the things, I'm not masking anymore. And so I'll probably be jumping around from topic to topic. That's, if you lived with me, you would know that I interrupt my conversation whenever I see a cool creature. Okay, so the scarf. So one of the really nice things was getting to use up every yard of yarn. And I had initially knit this yarn into a different scarf, but I didn't wear it because it was more of a shawl shape. And as much as I want to be someone that wears lots of big shawls in practice, I almost never do. So I frogged that project because it seemed a shame for the yarn to be sitting there. And oh my gosh, frogging it was an experience because this yarn is quite fuzzy. It's a single ply mohair, kid mohair merino blend. You can see it's pretty fuzzy. And for the initial shawl that I knit, I held it double. And it was beaded. So, frogging that, first I frogged it. I didn't try to separate the yarns as I went. Instead, I frogged it into one big ball with all the yarn held double, and then I separated it back into its original weight skeins. And so I wanted to make sure that, you know, I really got to use as much of this yarn as I could. And so it was really nice to have such an adjustable pattern. I might have knit this a bit long, but honestly, I love big long scarves. They're one of my favorites. And the other really nice thing about this pattern was you've got the really pretty lace on the edge. And then once you finish that, it's a very straightforward knit for the body. So for most of it, I didn't have to be looking at a chart. I could do it while I was reading or chatting with friends or anything like that. And that made it very valuable and made it easier for me to keep going for the length that I wanted. So I would definitely recommend this pattern, whose name I cannot remember. But as I said, I will link it below. And it is a free pattern, so everyone should be able to knit it. This yarn, as I mentioned, it's a kid mohair merino blend, and the mohair came from Texan goats. And this is a yarn from Quince & Company, who I used to be very fond of. They focus on sourcing their fiber from the U.S. and then creating their yarn in the U.S. And I really appreciated that, and I love the colors they choose. But unfortunately, Layla Raven, one of their designers, came out a few years ago and talked about the way that she was treated and the way other folks have been treated. And it turns out they're just not treating people the way that I want companies that I support to treat people. So I no longer buy their yarn. But this is Quince & Company Piper, I believe. And so that's what I'm wearing. I'm getting there with the apple. Nessie and Thistle are playing next to me in case you hear any yipping. They're my dogs if you're new to the podcast. Although honestly, if you're new to the podcast, you probably turned this video off a while ago. I feel like this is a video you're only interested in if you already know me. So, back to what I've been doing with my time off. My time off social media. So, I've been doing a lot of gardening. Gardening is very difficult on me, physically speaking. So, I do try to... I've tried to set up the garden so that they'll need as little maintenance as possible once they're going, and they're very close to going now. Like, I have drip irrigation installed, and I have mainly chosen to do a lot of perennials that are native to my area, not only because that helps benefit my more than human community, but also because it means less work for me. But even then, planting all of those plants and converting the lawn and all of that and the mulch was a lot of work. So I've been doing that and then resting a lot in between since, as I said, it takes a lot out of me. Thank you, Nessie. Nessie's my guard dog. She thinks I want a guard dog. Anyway, and I'm really looking forward to giving you some tours of the garden. It's raining right now, which... honestly, I love. It's fall, it's moody, but it does make it a little difficult to do video garden tours since kind of new technology. So I've mainly planted perennials with, a focus on native pollinator supporting ones. And then I also have a little herb bed that I put in this spring. And I'm doing a mix of both culinary herbs and medicinal herbs. So I started learning about medicinal herb craft. That's something that I've done. I do have a few raised beds where I'm learning more about how to grow annuals, vegetables, as well as some cut flowers. I love dahlias. They're really my favorite. But I've also tried zinnias and cosmos. And, amaranth. I love amaranth too. And auroch. Sunflowers. Basically, if you do an internet search for easiest cut flowers to grow, I've probably tried them. And I started all of this gardening back in the spring of 2021 with my final COVID government check because it felt like Joel and I both, neither of us had been very successful with plants before, and so we were a little nervous about spending a lot of money on something that might not work. But that COVID check, it was money that I hadn't planned for, and that because I am disabled and don't work anyway, I didn't need it for my daily finances. And we were fortunate that Joel was able to keep working throughout the pandemic. He just started working remotely. So we didn't need that money for our daily finances. And I struggled with whether I should keep the check at all, to be honest, or whether I should redistribute it. But at the end of the day, I thought that investing it in native pollinator plants would be really good for my local community, including the more than human community, as well as be very good for my mental health, because I haven't been able to walk as much as I used to, and I really miss spending time in parks and that kind of thing. So kind of bringing the park to me felt important. And it felt kind of like a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And we have a really incredible local nursery, well, about 45 minutes away, but especially in the world of native plants, that's local, who starts almost all their plants from seed, which is incredibly rare for regular nursery plants. A lot of them are propagated by cuttings. And what's so wonderful about seed-grown plants is it means we're preserving more diversity. And when I was thinking about putting in these plants, I also had to think about where I live. And like I mentioned, the reason our road is so busy is because we have a beautiful park that way, and then we have the Bay and Lake Ontario over here. So there's a lot of open spaces around me, And that means that any seeds that either birds eat and then, poop out later, or that get carried on the wind are going to go into open habitats, right? Like I had to think about what plants I might be sending forth into the world. And so since I was able to choose a lot of seed-grown natives, that just helps with the diversity, and a more diverse population is always a healthier population. So that's how I spent my third COVID check. And so in the backyard now, we have an area that's kind of tucked away behind the garage, and I now call it the spinney. And it is planted up with shrubs, native shrubs. Wait a minute. Hey, babe. I took a break because it's Joel's lunch break, so he and Ren, our third dog, came downstairs. I think I got Ren since I've been active in social media too. So yes, we added a third dog to our mix. I'm sure I'll talk about that at some point. But I was talking about the spinney. And so with the help of my friend Christy, who is also a wonderful gardener, I picked out a bunch of native shrubs that also grow berries and that are good with shade, because that's a quite shady zone. And then I underplanted them with shade-loving perennials, which honestly a lot of those are my favorite, because shade-loving perennials are the ones that live in the woods, and anything that reminds me of woods is beloved. And I'm sure I'll go into more detail about my various gardens later, but the reason I started talking about that one is that, it felt risky to put that COVID check into that money, but also I wouldn't have been that upset if it hadn't worked out, right? I would rather try it. And it turned out it worked. And that's really what gave me the confidence to begin to imagine transforming the rest of our plot. We live kind of more, I would say more urban than suburban. Our plot is, I don't know if it's even 1/10 of an acre. It's quite small. But that just means that it was more accessible to start to transform a lot of the grass into other plants that are more valuable. More valuable. Is that the word I want to use? Other plants that are more in reciprocity with the community, whether it be humans enjoying the beautiful flowers or the edible fruits, because I've planted a lot of raspberry and blackberry and clove currant and that kind of thing. Or the medicinal herbs, because it turns out a lot of the native perennials that are most helpful to pollinators are also medicinal for humans. So certainly these gardens have reciprocity with the humans around here, but also with the birds and the bees and the wasps and the beetles and all kinds of more than human kin, is what I was saying. So I've become a gardener, and I never thought I'd get to. It's the kind of thing that I've always dreamed about, having a garden of my own. I've always loved being outside in nature. I've always loved flowers. Nessie might bark here in a minute because her best friend in the world, our neighbor's golden doodle, is currently being walked down the street. So she likes to say hi to her. Anyway. So becoming a gardener, it makes me so happy, and I didn't think it would happen, both because I'm not very good with plants and because when I lived on my own, I lived in a small studio apartment downtown, so I didn't have the green space, and it's very much a privilege to have some space to garden, a bit of earth, and it's one that I'm grateful for every day. Wow, Nessie didn't bark. I'm quite proud of her. Nessie's 4 now. and I love her. We get along so well. She's much easier to live with than she was as a puppy, but she's still, she can still be quite naughty at times, or at least she has opinions and behaviors that we would prefer not. And one of those is that she thinks she needs to be a little watchdog when she's on the porch. But oh my gosh, when she was younger, like when she was a year old, I wouldn't be able to be recording this with her on the porch because she would bark at anything she saw moving outside the window. So we've come a long way in convincing her she doesn't need to bark at everything moving down the sidewalk. But I'm still pretty impressed that she didn't bark at her best friend. I call him out when I see my best friend. Anyway, so that's been one of the big changes in my life. Adding a third dog has certainly been a change. 3 dogs is a lot. And even though Ren spends a lot of her time with Joel up in his home office, it definitely makes it so that it's more of a lifestyle, right? With 3, like, you don't really go other places because trying to find a dog sitter for 3 dogs is not terribly easy. But, you know, with the pandemic, it's not like I was traveling anyway. And it's really fun to watch how they all interact with each other, so it's a good lifestyle, but that's definitely going to change. And then last summer, I learned how to can. It's funny we call it canning because it's actually done in jars, but you know, home food preservation is something that has become quite a big part of my life because it lets me eat locally, and especially in a more affordable way. Like I said, you know, these apples. The farm we get our community, our CSA share from, they're not certified organic, but they do have a description of their practices on their website, and they are trying to like take care of the land. It's just, oh yeah, Ness? Oh my goodness, you got big feelings? It's just, being certified organic involves a different process than kind of good land tending does. So these aren't organic apples, but they're certainly local, and $5 for the amount of applesauce I'll get is definitely very affordable. So I like that it has kind of expanded my food budget for the most part. Like, I'll show you. Ooh, that's how many apples I have now. All the jams that I've made are certainly more affordable than I would be able to buy jams in the store for. I have also started to experiment with canning tomatoes. Last year I just canned the ones that I grew, and then this year I bought 2 bushels from our farm and preserved those as well. What you doing, Ness? Thank you. Because we eat a lot of tomatoes throughout the year, both tomato sauce and pasta sauce. And I would like to know where my tomatoes come from as much as possible. And so that probably has been another thing that the rhythms, more trucks, the rhythms of kind of food preservation, because of course you have to do that when things are in season, and I have to buy the produce when it's in season, and then I have to keep my fingers crossed that there will be a day or two in the next week where I'll have the spoons to process this stuff. And it takes a lot of time as well as energy and pain levels. So that's been a lifestyle shift as well. The herbalism, I think those are the big ones. So essentially, I have been becoming more and more the cottage witch that I've always wanted to be. And gosh, it makes me really happy. And talking with my therapist, as I said earlier, she asked about social media, and I explained some of my issues, but also all of the value I've received from my online friends over the years, and she helped me see that I would rather have something imperfect that lets me connect to this online community than be disconnected from y'all. So that's why I'm back. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, I envision this podcast now being, rather than focusing so much on knitting and spinning, which I think can fall into kind of the capitalist trap of focusing on what I've produced and, showing off my finished objects and works in progress and that kind of thing, which I love to do, don't get me wrong, but I'd like to do more than that, and I'm still trying to figure out how that's going to work with knitting. Anyway, but I want to talk about all of my cottage witchery because it all feels connected to me these days. So if you're interested in that, if you're interested in sitting down with me and listening to me ramble about who knows what, while I work on some kind of craft, because it feels good to be working on something while I'm sitting and talking, then I guess let me know. Yeah, I know, even though I haven't been producing content, and I haven't been on Instagram, but I still watch podcasts on YouTube, and the ones I like best are the ones that show folks in the process of making. So that's what I would like to do. But a lot of those are really beautiful, and there's like beautiful background music, and they've been edited and all that kind of thing. And I don't have the capacity to create that kind of video. So mine is going to be a bit more raw, a bit more like you're coming over to my house. Traffic noise, dog beating up her bed to get her big feelings out, and all. But I just want them to be genuine. I don't want to be anything other than myself with y'all. And I don't want to feel like I have to be better or anything like that. And these podcasts will also, be trying, this is also thanks to my therapist. I mentioned that I was thinking about maybe podcasting seasonally, something that was a bit more, or a bit simpler. And she said, why do you have to have a schedule at all? Wouldn't it be more in keeping with disabled life to just not have a schedule and just record when you want to and you're able to? It's one thing to read, right? To read these radical philosophies and to agree with them. And it's entirely another to internalize them. So that'll be part of the journey is, hearing me try to sort out what it means to be a disabled cottage witch living in a fairly urban environment in the 21st century, and what it means to have white privilege, and but also want to be imagining a world beyond white supremacy, and what it means to have straight privilege. Although that's another thing, I've realized that I'm actually probably bisexual, pansexual, anyway. But I am in a committed monogamous relationship with a cis man, and I'm a cis woman. So we have that privilege. And what does it mean to be in that, to have that privilege while also trying to queer our relationship and imagine a future, a queer, disabled future. That's the kind of thing that I've been trying to imagine in my own quiet, soft, homebody cottage witch way these past couple years. And I'd like to invite you to imagine with me. So, I've missed you all. I would love for you to leave comments. I am going to answer them all. I've realized that's something that I would really like to prioritize. And so feel free to leave comments. Probably here on YouTube is easiest. Although, I think I'm going to be on Instagram again too. I debated that one more. But my friend Kristen showed me there is a way for me to experience Instagram without the ads, which, the ads were just... So I think I'll try being on Instagram as well. But I'll definitely be able to reply to comments here on YouTube. So if you do have an account that lets you comment on YouTube, feel free. Or, you know what? Email me. I was a blogger before I was a podcaster. And I miss that kind of long-form writing and long-form comments, at least that the book blogging community was focused on. So feel free to email me at thecharmofit@gmail.com. And I would love to hear from you. Let's see. What should the prompt be? Do you like applesauce? And if so, how do you eat it? Do you eat it plain? I like it stirred into oatmeal myself, but Joel eats it plain. If I eat it plain, I usually add a little bit of cream to it, and then it's dessert. So it was really nice sitting with you and chatting. I am peeling my very last apple, which is exciting because, man, there's a full box to begin with, and now I have a full bowl of peels. So thank you for keeping me company. And I will bring Nessie over, since she was kind of at least a minor character. Empty box. All the peels. Okay, Nessie, come here. Good girl. So this is 4-year-old Nessie, who's still a chaos puppy. Yeah, you are, huh? Gotta watch everything out the window. And Thistle is still around. She is 16 and a half though, and she is napping, so I'm not gonna wake her up because when she's awake right now, sometimes she has a lot of big feelings, and I don't always know how to fix her big feelings, or what she's asking for is what I should say. So I'm gonna let her sleep. But here's Nessie and myself wishing, wishing that you find some moments of peace and stillness in your day. Bye. Who are you kidding? Of course Thistle had to be on the show for at least a minute. Here she is. She's woken up now, so I didn't disturb a nap. And then I thought I'd introduce you to Ren. Ren! Hi! Hi! Yeah! Oh, you're gonna say hi to the camera? Oh, come here, big dog. So this is our little Ren dog. And she's the 3rd member of the puppy family. Good girl. Oh, yes, I know you love the pets. You love the pets. Oh, bye.